Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
Where we continue to follow the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden now.
Those are just some of the scenes overnight as thousands of Americans gathered in celebration of Osama bin Laden's death.
Former Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill says he has thought about the mission every day since that May Day in 2011.
For multiple conversations you had with Rob O'Neill over the past year and a half, how'd you get
access? And you described that his head kind of exploded.
Yes.
When you hit him.
I actually hit him 3 times because I shot him twice when he was standing and once on the ground.
That is the fucking American badass right there.
We are not going for fame and we are not going for bravado. We are going for the single mom who dropped her kids off at elementary school on a Tuesday morning, and then 45 minutes later she jumped to her death out of a skyscraper.
If you need help, hang up and then dial your operator.
I'm Rob O'Neill, and this is the Operator Podcast.
Welcome back to the Operator Podcast. I'm your host, Robert O'Neill, and today is a great interview because we have an operator, a no shit operator. Jeff Depatie was a special operator for the Canadian Special Forces for CANSOF. And in my notes say 14 years, not quite to retirement, 10 deployments, worked for Joint Task Force 2, which is the Canadian Tier 1 unit. Bad motherfuckers, best snipers in the world. Sorry to say that to my former colleagues.
Stir the pot, huh?
Yeah. Hey, might as well start off with that. Yeah. Yeah. So welcome, Jeff. Thanks for your time today. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, no, the pleasure's all mine, Rob. I really appreciate being on with guys like you, doing the work on the other side of the work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Once it's over, the military doesn't pay your mortgage, the electric bill, or for your psychiatrist. So you gotta figure out
they don't tell me where to go. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So I've heard some interviews with you before, and okay, so before we get into it, Jeff's got a lot of great. I mean, some of the stories I've heard about being in the infantry, in the sniper unit with JTF2, overseas, and I've heard you mention before, like, and it's weird that a lot of Canadian military doesn't even get recognized. People don't really know the story. Maybe that's because they have better OPSEC than a lot of us do. But you guys did some amazing shit. We'll get into that too. Something that I think I saw a tattoo of yours when you were on with Mike Ritland, and you were mentioning something called the gene key. Is that right? Yeah. Can you explain that? Because because a lot of the stuff that you talk about is with, you said closed note, open note thinking, holistic healing, stuff like that, like a great system. And that was one thing that really stuck out. I try to take notes as well as I can. Sometimes I get off the subject, but can you explain the gene key?
Yeah. So the gist of it, Rob, is someone I have a lot of respect for, a British fella named Richard Rudd. He condensed down a bunch of practices and he created something called the gene keys. Yeah, there's a tattoo. Those are my gene keys. Some people say it looks like a zipper, kind of does.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're Chinese hexagrams from the I Ching, and he condensed all these ancient wisdoms into what he calls the gene keys. And they're actually really powerful neuro-linguistic programming, if you will. Just like anything, right? We really make a lot of sense of our world through our words. The problem is we just can't make full sense of reality with words. Words run out once we reach the paradoxical nature of reality. So anyhow, the gene keys, in essence, it talks about shadows, gifts, and acidic states. And if we boil that down to a more kind of colloquial chat, shadows are fear-based projections when you use fear-based hormones, fear-based thinking, or closed node thinking. So you don't have access to your upper cerebral faculties as much as you would as you move through the gift and the acidic states. Now, it kind of sounds really esoteric, and the way he lays it out, it is esoteric, but really it's biology. I don't want to say at its simplest because it's hyper complex. But if you are constantly in a fear state, and you've been around these people, you've probably experienced it. Either like you collapse right down to fight or flight, or you live in a stress paradigm. And if you live in that stress paradigm, what happens is it'll create a feedback loop. It'll focus your attention, it'll shift your perception, and it'll start to mold your values. And this happens to all of us. We're all, I don't want to say victims of our conditioning, because that we are not. You know, we can rise above it. Many people do. Most people don't, though. Most people will stay in their patterning from their genes to their epigenetics to their childhood. And the way the gene keys works is, you know, you have your own specific setup, like you'd have like your own collage of them, and I have my own collage. And this is something that's kind of cool about it is it's probably never, it's such a vast set of numbers that it'll never repeat. And that's kind of cool to think about, that you are indeed a unique snowflake. You know what I mean?
In a good way, though, right?
In a good way. Yeah.
Okay.
I just like putting the word snowflake there on.
I love the way you did that, because nowadays everyone either refers to a storm or someone that they think is weak, but a unique. So how many of these keys does everybody have? Is it the same number or a different number?
Yeah, it's the same number. I can't remember. He calls it their hologenetic profile. And there's about, I think 15, 18 of them. I don't remember offhand. Well, wait, 1, 2. I think there's like 14, I think.
And they're unique to everybody, huh?
Well, like you may have one of mine. So I have one twice, and that's integrity. You may have integrity in yours. And then there's like a sub projection of that. So there's 64 keys, and then there's a 1 through 6 line based on that. Now, the thing with it is, like, you open it up and it's going to seem a little, people might use terms like new age or woo woo, but it is anything but that. What I've come to understand about it is it gives you tools to realize your fear-based projections and how those patterns from, you know, shame, guilt, apathy, anger, fear, and desire and pride have shaped you. And what it does is it's really super interesting, because it collapses your own power down, and it makes you moldable to the systems around you. And when you rise above it, you are able to seek your own individuality really deeply. Now, not being an individual amongst a collective, but the belief, and I believe this, you know, you have your own genetic programming. You are unique, right? And in that, some people might use the term psyche wants to express itself. There's all kinds of like Jungian terms and things like this. But when you transmute those fears, those hard-earned lessons, and all the way up to like PTSD level hard-earned lessons, you are able to bring new gifts into your world, for yourself and the community around you. You know, you're able to have deeper levels of patience and compassion. It's kind of like, remember the old Kung Fu movies? The old Kung Fu master, he's always smiling, right? Mm-hmm. He's moving through the world and he's smiling. You know, he knows something that others don't, because he is not able to be collapsed down into a fear state. It doesn't mean you don't have your survival mechanisms. You know, I'm not, those don't go away. You need to keep those survival mechanisms. Like I want my body to react if I'm about to be hit by a bus or mauled by a tiger, you know, but I want to be able to come out of it quickly, which is kind of interesting, you know, chatting with an operator, because this is one of the I would say adapted skills. You know, there's probably some genetics there, but I doubt you would disagree if I said something like operators are created as they go through. You know, you're molded and you're shaped. It's less about you always rising, although, you know, selections and stuff, you do have to rise, but passing those tests creates a new version of you, right? And one of the things DARPA found about operators is that we can metabolize cortisol extremely quick. So yeah, we still get the big cortisol jack, but we're able to function it back down and metabolize and get ready and stay in the fight up here. You know what I mean? We've all been in situations where the black narrows us down a little, but
it does.
You know,
is that, I mean, that's probably like your first skydive, when they explain the first time you leave an aircraft, you're looking through straws and you don't realize you're backsliding because your feet are coming up. But for me anyway, the more I did it, like it seemed like it would open up, and you get, you know, towards jump number 500. Yeah, you get a little adrenaline, but it's not as scary as, I mean, is that kind of the same thing?
It's exactly that. So the first time you jump out of the plane, you are literally jumping into the unknown, where your nervous system, your brain, and your body have never been before, right? You might hit the wind tunnel. You might, you know, you do some boogie boarding on the ground, you know, you're pulling a few slips and toggles, but you haven't jumped out of the plane yet. And it is so far out of our natural programming that it is the deep unknown, right? Like every bit of it is like the body's like, unless you're a psycho, like where your systems are tuned off, you're like, this is a little messed up, okay. But I guess it's part of the job. But as you do that, your nervous system becomes attuned to it, and exactly like literally down to the biology, your gaze starts to open up and you're able to soak up more sensory input and then make better sense of it. So that's with skydiving, but every little stimuli in life has that same effect. Everything is constantly giving us feedback. And usually what happens is our gaze and our ears are a little bit closed off, and people start to live out patterns that generally don't serve them fully.
Yeah, I mean, so you say fear-based what's the other one? Fear-based, and then the smiling kung fu master. What's that one?
I'm using a scale from a guy called Dr. David Hawkins. It's a scale of consciousness. On one side you have fear, on the other side you have love. He uses the word love, but think like peace, enlightenment, joy, neutrality, acceptance, a whole bunch of different sensations. Now they both translate to biology. One's really cortisol based in fear, and then the other ones are more like satiated, like ghrelins and serotonins and things like that, where what literally happens is in the fear-based side, you're in an insecure state. Whether you're like a champ, you know what I mean? Like if I use the word like pipe hitter or chasing the dragon or whatnot, like your body is still in that state. You might be moving through it like a warrior, but you're still using those states. So what happens is it closes down the nodes in your mind. And that's okay for a little bit. That's the job of the warrior, I think, is to plunge his hands or her hands into the muck to experience those states so that we can have a more balanced side. The issue right now is like on the love-based side, most people, you can just tell by their pacing, they don't really feel at peace or satiated. They don't feel in control fully. There is some people, and I'm using a very general term, but if we really look globally, that's the case. He also used the terms power versus force. So if you action something from a fear-based place, you're using what's called force. And usually the alignment doesn't fit that nice. When you project from love, he calls it power. And those are people like Gandhi, MLK, I'm going to use like some religious and theological people, but just think of them as people like Buddha or Jesus, Muhammad, people who are able to almost not even like lift a finger in any kind of violence and completely shift the world. It's a different place to project from. Anyhow, the thing with gene keys is most people will pick it up, especially men, and it'll seem a little bit like, okay, this doesn't agree with my left brain thinking. It's really designed as parables and koans and not meant to be read. It's meant to be experienced and then let it sit and you contemplate and you come back to it. But it just opens you up and it actually makes you way stronger. That's what's really cool about it, because when you face your fears, those are the worst things that you've experienced, right? You've locked them away for a reason, because you couldn't handle the energetics of that moment. And so going back and facing those is really difficult. I mean, you talk to anyone who has like a full-blown PTSD or whatnot, they'll corroborate this in an instant, especially if it's an acute event. The tricky part though is it can also come out as a drip, and it can have the same impacts. You know what I mean? Like the daily bump and grind against your ego can start to fold this stuff, and it can start to really shift us off living a whole and complete life. It's not sometimes when I talk about it, I feel like a little bit not preachy, but like an old school Mormon or something. But the truth is most people are seeking, it's even in your constitution, the pursuit of happiness. You know what I mean?
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think that's what they were actually talking about. They were talking about a more holistic existence as yourself. In fact, Hawkins, he's able to calibrate things as well, like the Bible and whatnot, and like their level of consciousness. So it goes from 0, like a rock might be 1 up to like 1,000 is kind of like your enlightened masters and whatnot. But the Constitution is one of in its original form, where it was originally drafted, was like one of the highest scoring objects of all time. because it had a lot of good behind it. Since then, his argument is like it's been manipulated and moved, and I don't really weigh in on it.
Getting more people involved, people in power are gonna try to manipulate to keep themselves in more power, like just politicians, for example. Like narcissism, is that one of them? Because it always seems like a lot of politicians are narcissists. They get there and they're all about their personal power, and they're really good at portraying what you want to hear to keep them in power, but there's something behind it, where like the whole thing with no shame. I mean, you've seen it, I'm sure, in Canadian politics. We see it here in the United States every single day. And just being someone that can say anything with zero shame, narcissism got to be in there. I don't think, because you said you have integrity twice, I don't think a lot of these politicians have any integrity at all.
Well, so narcissism is the emergent property of whatever came from that. If you look at a lot of politicians, so it's kind of an interesting fact here, and I'm going to take a little swing here, and
sure.
I'll back up a bit. Everybody comes into life with what we would call wounding, and wounding is just the tendency to project from a fear-based place. We're survival. We're some of the greatest survival adaptations in the universe that we know of, right? Like we can handle a lot of different situations, but we come in with epigenetic wounding already from mom and dad. And then we get it in childhood. There's times where our needs aren't met, and then we develop these non-coping mechanisms, and they're slight. They're not always like you become batshit crazy. You know what I mean? But lots of these people go through that, and then eventually their projections, that, like I said, the emergent properties of it start to manifest as things like narcissism, grandiose or otherwise. Different forms of it. That becomes the quote unquote personality disorder of it. Because that's kind of how the mind constructs, right? Like a tree, it spreads out, and the more you live without facing these non-coping mechanisms, the more you're going to move into these positions of people with massive disrupts in their system. Because like I'm not like super genius, but there's a lot of times where I'm like, is nobody else seeing this? And then you talk to someone and they're like, yeah, I'm seeing it. And you talk to this person, it's like everybody's seeing it, but it's happening. So it's got to be a little bit askew, right? And then you said it though. What happens is, for some reason, they're not able to move into a thriving state where they're satiated, where they're like, oh, okay, I have everything I need. I'm a complete human. I don't need to distract myself. I don't need to try to squash my inadequacies with these distractions or addictions, or this pursuit of, I don't want to use the word power because I kind of attach it to that love and a more balanced approach to leadership. But force just doesn't sound right either. But this imbalanced projection they have. And man, sometimes in the wake of that is some nasty stuff, and so you said it though. You had this beautiful constitution.
Yeah.
And we'll almost call it like a revelation, like in essence, it was a group revelation where it's like, we're actually thinking on a higher plane than we were before, I'm saying we, but as you separated from the British colony at the time. But what happens is the distance between the next person and the revelation, as it gets farther, we start to get into wisdom unearned and characteristics like this, where its essence begins to be lost, right? And now, compared to where it was, there's 400 million people and there's a whole bunch of different things going on. I won't call them issues, but like a whole bunch of things going on.
A lot of things going on right now. Yeah.
A lot of things going on, so it kind of begins to diminish a little bit. And it leads to these people. But this is like the really cool thing. And I'm just going to keep going on the scale of consciousness because it's something people can look up. There's a point where you move. He uses the word courage. And courage in its Latin roots means basically from the heart, but from the part of you that really is you. And you step into these things and you start, like, acceptance and neutrality are very difficult, because the poles, being on a polarized side is very easy. You got a herd over here and you got a herd over there. It's very easy to hang out there. It's safe. But what it
Yeah,
is
it's the whole being in a room with people that all agree on the same things. That's what a lot of people have a tendency to do right now. And you're really not. I don't think you're going to get a lot out of everyone agreeing. It's like the whole if you're the toughest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room type stuff. But yeah, I can see the herds and on one side and toe the party line type stuff.
well, exactly. And then we get a classic finger point, right? And it's like, okay, well, this is just dualistic thinking. So we go back to language. That's one of its issues is the English language, most languages on earth, and I think all of them can only really work up to a dualistic nature. It's very hard to have a conversation about paradox where two things are happening at once and are both true. And the thing is the like the nature of the universe is built on this. If fundamental physicists on like the lowest scale, it's all paradoxical in the quantum world. And the same thing on the greatest side of it too, with black holes and stuff like that. And the only reason I'm like using those examples is because
it's cool.
The edges of our kind of like understanding of the physical world, and they both are showing that it's paradoxical. And so it's hard to have a paradoxical conversation though, especially in government.
Yeah,
you know, I won't pretend to really know the solution to it.
Oh yeah, I never do either, and I actually get in trouble just for asking questions because that means you're not believing everything they say, type stuff. And it's what's cool is you bring up the black holes. You mentioned Muhammad, you mentioned Jesus, and it almost kind of, well, it makes me wonder, like, because obviously again with religion, you either I'm right and you're wrong. That's the way it seems to be. But like existing together, being the same thing, like that, it almost like something so outside our realm of thinking could be possible. That is it energy, is it God, is it the prophet, is it a savior? It's just like you said, it's an open note thinking type thing. I think am I anywhere closer, or am I just running my mouth?
Yeah, so we're getting, I think, closer, right, to just to me, what is the real discussion that we all should have?
I mean, we're definitely pissing people off. That's you and me right now. I do know that.
Well, so this is what I would say, Rob. If people are shaking their fingers at me, I'll take the blame. Really check in with your ego. That's the ego talking. It's like, oh no, that's pushing me to an edge. And the ego is a survival mechanism, and that's it being triggered, saying, oh, I'm being tested outside of what I know. And it has its place as a survival tool, but it is also, it's the devil in the mirror. It's like what's keeping you from fully flourishing. And as long as we have these systems that, in essence, kind of keep us caged in our patterns, but also don't define what real success is, right? Like, most people would use words like money and whatnot, and people like, I don't know, like I'll just throw out another one, like Jeff Bezos. Like, at what point do you have enough money? Like, because we're playing a zero-sum game. So it's coming from somewhere. And, with like 2.3 billion hungry mouths on earth, like, again, I'm not really like trying to step on toes. I'm just trying to have a conversation. But it goes to like Orwell's, whatever, 1982, where he uses the term doublethink. What happens in doublethink is, well, maybe you don't know, but, and I'm saying we as humans, there's a spectrum of truth. It can be filled with facts and theories and whatnot, but there's like this spectrum of truth. And in order to achieve doublethink, you have to totally negate half the truth, right? You have to, if there's like 50 people on this side, 50 people on this side, and they're pointing fingers at each other, well, at some point you have to totally negate their truth to make your truth real. And that becomes a real issue, because there's 8 billion of us, on the same planet, not really able to escape it anytime soon to go get resources elsewhere. So this is where, like, we talk about open node thinking. What happens is your eyes and ears and the rest of your body absorb sensory input. It comes in, and then your brain starts to jumble it around the attention centers you have, and it'll either go into what's called implicit biases, sometimes called stereotypes, where you don't even really think about it. It just shortcuts the loop, because it's a faster way to think than trying to could you imagine like walking through your day, like going to the bathroom and having to recontemplate every step of the way, like
yeah,
it would be fucking nuts.
That's where the muscle memory comes in. Like, I just kind of know what I'm supposed to do.
Like, and so it has its place as a really powerful tool, but then it also shuts down that open node thinking. And that's where we are right now. From my kind of humble assessment, though, the start to the solution is pretty simple. And this is the concept that an American duo came up with, which is called post-traumatic growth. It's the opposite side of post-traumatic stress disorder. And what happens is we move into stress states. Okay. Move into a stress state. We may pull out of it with, with help from friends, proper tools, therapies, plant medicines, movement, breathing properly, meditation. There's all kinds of things that help a human being reheal his or her nervous system. Now, with post-traumatic growth, you actually expand your nervous system's capability beyond what it was before. Now, this is simple stress and adaptation. These models are used all the time with muscle development and intellectual development, all these kinds of things. But there's a more holistic approach to what growth means, and that is the full experience of the human body. It's very difficult to measure that, though. That's why I overlay it with the scale of consciousness, because we can actually test this. In some of the programs I run, we use the muscle testing to start the calibrations on people. But then what we do is we corroborate it with other factors. With there's things in the medical field called the GAD-9, the PHQ-7 or PHQ-9 or GAD. I can't remember what, but they're what's called flourishing scales. They measure how well a human is moving through space and time, not just like on a technical level, but how much they're getting out of life, how much their relationships are healthy and whatnot. And we overlay this. And what's really cool is the higher someone's consciousness is, the more complete they are. But really, really cool is the more stress they're able to handle. They have a higher capacity, a higher bandwidth to soak up more of the world. This as a tier 1 operator, like I really appreciate, I used to call myself a tier 1 janitor after I left the military. So when you were talking about that, I had an appreciation. But that there's a reason on, once you reach the levels of team 6, that this guy's a better fit than potentially Joe or Jane off the street who's never been through any of this stuff, right? Because their capacity for that world has expanded. Now we can do that in many realms, the emotional realm and whatnot. But anyways, post-traumatic growth. As a solution.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go. No.
If you want to, does it? Can you? When you said something about facing your fear, like you don't want to get outside your comfort zone.
Yeah,
it seems to me like something that you can change if you do face your fear. We talked about skydiving, but also weird stuff that I noticed is the more I got shot at in combat, the more I got used to it. Because the first time you never forget. It's scary. It snaps. It's fast. You sometimes you don't know where it comes from.
Okay, we're doing this.
And then you do see how people react. I've seen people freeze up. Then a few missions later, they're fine. And I got to a point where it went from adrenaline just to being, at least the night got more exciting, to not getting adrenaline, to like, I need to change what I'm doing because that's going to lead to complacency. And then but then I was used to combat. I was used to shooting people, seeing people get killed. But the more I got away from it, the more it started to bother me, because I was worried for a while, am I a sociopath because it doesn't bother me? But then I grow literally older and I start thinking, wow, that was some fucked up shit we were doing. So I don't know if that's the growth or it's the right way to go, but
no, this is perfect. This is perfect. Cause I remember being like, I got to get out of fucking bed for this, like, come on, having a good sleep, cause you do is you accept death in yourself to a whole different level, as like, but what happens is two concepts, suppression and repression. So as warriors, we suppress a lot. We consciously bury things away, but then we also repress, where we unconsciously bury things away. Because you've had some time now on the other side of the fence, and you've thought about it, and you're like, okay, there's a lot of emotions there to process, because everything we experience goes through our emotional centers, but our conscious mind doesn't process all those emotions. And that happens all our life. And like I said, you already come into this story, your own story, with some preconditioning on that. So definitely to kind of get back to the whole kind of PTG as a solution and facing fears, is facing those emotions. That's why a lot of guys, even the toughest guys you've ever seen, don't want to talk about the emotions that went behind something. because they are literally the demons that are the scariest for us. They're the energy of it. That's the word I like to use. Like the energy of it.
That's a good word. Yeah.
Well, you know, it takes away words like scared and fear. Cause like for a long time I was like, well, I'm not scared of it. It's not, I don't have a fear. It's something else. It's the energy distorts how the neurons form, we'll say. Not like literally breaks them, but it creates this pattern that will not in the long term serve, you know. Like look at Rambo. Rambo came out of Vietnam and his behavior is not going to serve him all that well in the long run. You know what I mean? Not in like the civvy world. Not saying that all those skills are lost and whatnot. So
on the heels of the second largest bank failure in U.S. history and the 8th interest rate hike within a year, 186 more banks are at risk of collapsing, and your bank could be next, unless the Fed does what they did just back in March and print $300 billion out of thin air, making your dollar worthless. Not to mention the recession risk that could have a significant impact on your investment and retirement accounts. Take my advice. Protect your financial future with something real. Gold and silver from my friends at Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA or 401k with physical gold and silver, or if you prefer, have it delivered securely right to your front door. Since the beginning of time, there has been only one universal currency that is always of value, and that's gold. Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry, 5 stars with TrustLink, a AAA rating with the Business Consumer Alliance, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. You can invest with confidence because of the quality and service of Allegiance Gold. Get up to $5,000 in free silver on a qualifying purchase when you visit protectwiththeoperator.com. That's protectwiththeoperator.com, or you can give them a call at 844-790-9191. Don't let the Fed play Monopoly with your money. Protect your future with Allegiance Gold. Visit protectwiththeoperator.com, protectwiththeoperator.com, or give them a call at 844-790-9191. Hydration is really important from everything from having a good day to living a long, healthy life. And if you haven't tried Hoist yet, you need to try it. Hoist is a battlefield-proven hydration that works 110% better than water, and it keeps you hydrated longer than water. It's a special formula of electrolytes, carbohydrates, and fuels. It's absorbed rapidly to keep you powering through the next objective, the next mission, the next field of fire or rep, the next lap. It's one of only 3 hydration products approved by the Department of Defense, and it is on over 90% of military installations globally, and it's serving our war fighters in the field, in operations, and in training. So go to www.drinkhoist.com and use code OPERATOR to save 15%, or use the store locator that's there too. So that's drinkhoist.com, code OPERATOR. And Hoist proudly offers 10% off military and first responders on their website. So again, that's drinkhoist.com. Friends, family, and loved ones, I bet you have not purchased a Father's Day gift yet, have you? Not to fear, the leaders in below-waist grooming are here. I'm talking about our friends at Manscaped. They're saving the day yet again with the total package for the father figure in your life this year. It's time to upgrade his game from the waist to the face with this exclusive offer. Have him join the 8 million men worldwide who trusted Manscaped and get 20% off and free shipping when you use the code THEOPERATOR at manscaped.com. My father is pretty hairy. I'd be willing to bet yours is as well, so you can hook him up. He needs his product. They start with the Ultimate Father's Day MVP, the Performance Package 4.0. Inside this package, he'll find their signature lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, brand new Weed Whacker 2.0 ear and nose hair trimmer, crop preserver ball deodorant, crop reviver toner, performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all his goodies. I like these bags. They're really nice. And we can't forget about the moneymaker. Manscaped has absolutely changed the game with their new Beard Hedger Pro Kit for fathers around the world. Included is the Beard Hedger Trimmer, beard shampoo and conditioner, beard oil, beard balm, and 2 free gifts with the signature beard comb and scissors. We all know Dad loves their comfort. If his grooming routine is already dialed, make sure to hook him up with Manscaped's Boxers 2.0. These are without a doubt the best boxers for men of all ages. Whether he's mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, or golfing in the sun, these moisture-wicking boxers breathe without breaking a sweat. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code THEOPERATOR at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code THEOPERATOR. Make this Father's Day one he won't forget with Manscaped. Already into May, and the year is flying by, but it's still the new year, and you still need new gear. Tactical baby gear, that is. Dirty diapers, screaming fits, and sleepless nights. Parenthood is not for the faint of heart. I know from experience. Tactical baby gear was founded by parents for parents with the belief that regardless of the challenges, there is nothing more rewarding. With a durable diaper bag that you're proud to carry, you'll overcome every spit up, blowout, and meltdown along the way. Prepare for whatever parenting leads you with a customizable tactical baby bag that's ready for an incredible journey ahead, but be ready because it could get messy. Go check out tacticalbabygear.com, and you'll check out their day packs, their baby carriers, wagons, strollers, accessories, everything in between. And the gear is highest quality. Most of it is MOLLE fitted, so you can put stuff on there. There's on the cruisers, they've got everything from the MOLLE webbing and 3-point safety harness to little snack tray and adult cup holders. That's pretty cool. And then I like the tactical baby carrier. The baby can face in or out depending on the baby's developmental stage or the weather, because you don't want to put baby in the hailstorm. It's cotton padded interior with machine washable liner, MOLLE compatible, and they have the acknowledgement from the International Hip Dysplasia Institute as hip healthy, so you can actually wear your baby like a static line reserve on a static line jump, baby. TacticalBabyGear.com, 15% off, and use the code THEOPERATOR. TacticalBabyGear.com, code THEOPERATOR. God, guns, and diapers, baby.
Post-traumatic growth, though, is that flip side of PTSD. So PTSD, I'm going to use if we were like scaling it as a low. It feels like a low. No one's going to disagree that it's like, it feels heavy and burdensome.
Yes,
it's not usually a hands up party, right? It can be quite terrible. What I'm proposing, though, is one, we offer up this counter solution to it, which is post-traumatic growth, as not just a form of hope, but like where you can wear those stress disorders as a badge. They're difficult. You know, sometimes like some guys come out and they've lost a leg. And of course, I don't know if you have lady listeners and ladies as well, but they come out, they've lost a leg. They're wrestling with the moralistic wounds of war, you know, like, okay, did we do the right thing? Was that the right thing? I don't know, you know, like,
yeah.
Usually that's where the weight of the concept of killing comes into, where, okay, man, actually deciding to kill someone is quite the massive decision. You know, in the moment we're so trained to do it that it's different. And it, you know how it is when it's me or him, send flowers. Like it's that simple.
Yeah, no shit. And even at the time, it's to the point where it's a competition with your friends. That's what it seemed like. It's, I mean, you're not, we're not comparing notes or showing pictures, but it's like, well, he got one, I better get one. It's just that level of lack of humanity. It's just being in that moment too. And then I think, and I'm not an expert, a lot of guys don't like to talk about PTSD because it's so suppressed, and you do have to face things. And something else too is you don't need to be a combat vet to have some traumatic stuff in your past that you don't want to bring up. And I think it's important for people to at least bring it up, but then get into other kind of treatments too, just to face the demons. Yeah, well, you kind of touched on it. We use the word culture in the unit. I don't know what you guys use for the ecosystem of you operators working together, right? It creates a culture of its own. We're not going to disagree that you plop you out of Virginia and you put it in a preschool, it's going to look a little funky, perhaps. You know what I mean? It's its own special ecosystem, and that ecosystem feeds back. That's how we work. There's a constant interaction between you and the other people, but also the ecosystem, and that one works well for serving what it serves. You know, I'll just use the term American ideals in this case. Okay. Sure.
But yeah, it's a constant feedback like that. And it has to be looked at. And that goes back to what you were saying about culture or people facing stuff. This is it. It's cut and dry. We all have stuff to take a peek at.
Yeah.
But to me, the invitation is you courageously go there because you can be more than what you are. And I get it. I've been in the depths of severe PTSD. It's heavy. Your feet are heavy. You know, your prefrontal cortex is shutting down. You're literally, your mind is calcifying in certain ways. You have these patterns that are trying to play out, these memories that you don't want to face, and it's heavy. The isolation, or what I call constriction, though, is the person's first clue that they just need to talk to someone.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be even a fucking pro, you know.
No, just talk to someone. Yeah.
Just talk to someone. That's how we make relevance realization, is with other people, right? You know, even you and I right now, we're discussing things, and we're kind of making new relevance, you know, like that's what we do.
I agree.
That's,
yeah, totally.
We have that conversation. For our documentary, Dark Night of Our Soul, we spent years looking into this concept. One, really, from our own point of view, validating post-traumatic growth, and more to the point, intentionally facilitating post-traumatic growth, where we stress people on purpose in order to achieve growth effects. Because there's two ways to really have like massive change in your life. A really fucking gnarly, stressful situation comes in and fucking hits you like a lightning bolt, and your life has changed forever. And the other one is the opposite side of that, where you experience almost bliss level love, having a child, meeting the love of your life. You know, it could be like a deep connection with nature in a moment. For some, it's some kind of religious experience. But they both set in and they start to like shake up and what we call alter your state of consciousness. So we have this thing called like kind of, and this is ish, you know, because we don't fully know what the brain is beyond some statistical properties, but it shakes it up and it forces it start to recalibrate. And when that happens, this is where the concepts of inducing growth become more relevant. So example, if you experience something very stressful, okay, you know, buddy's blowing up, boom, bits and bytes are launched on the windshield, you know, you throw on the windshield wipers and you get out of there, like, okay, that's a big moment in time.
Yes.
If you sleep and get into REM sleep that night, REM sleep, which is hard to get into when you're stressed,
yes,
you're
it is
70% less likely to develop PTSD. Just that one
if
factor.
you can get some sleep that night
Into REM sleep. So what
into REM
happens
sleep.
is you,
Okay,
the theory is your brain is doused in DMT, and your brain is able to start making sense of what's going on, your own sense of it, you know. Otherwise, what it does is it stores it away as a stress wound, and then that gets layered on top of, and then layers and layers get harder to break through, right? Peeling the onion's difficult when there's a lot of layers. If you get into REM the next night, the studies show that you're about 40%. So off that 70, we got 30% left. 40% of that, if you get into REM sleep, you won't develop a PTSD symptom. So PTSD roughly is like 30 days of stress, and it won't go away after that. Up to that point, it's just like kind of considered the processing period, but that's just sleep. If you drink healthy, like good pure water, if you eat properly, if you have good communication with people, if you move, if you keep, you know, contemplations, meditation. So those are just different frequencies of brain waves. Contemplation, meditation is just like kind of like lower waves just before sleep. Contemplation is where you're kind of in and out of like an alpha state into like a delta state, and then beta is like really concentrated. But if you keep massaging these, you're more likely and more likely to not be locked away in that, well, I'll just call it a prison, because that's what it can feel like. And none of those cost one penny. You know, our bodies are made to handle stress, maybe not as much as we give it right now in the modern world. You know, we're constantly taxing our systems like crazy. And that, I think that's there's two keys for veterans listening, if any of this is resonating. If you do feel constricted down, now life is not it's not supposed to be a high. That's just not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a bit of both. You know, we travel the lows so we can appreciate the highs, and the highs give us hope to travel the lows. And we're constantly expanding that. I think that's what we're here to evolutionarily do. That's why we have consciousness. But if you are feeling these constrictions, any single practice we looked at beyond, that self-care I kind of mentioned, the first step is talking to someone else, whether you're going for ketamine treatments, psilocybin, ayahuasca, bufo. If you're going for some kind of talk therapy, the first step is you're actually engaging with another human being. And that does a couple things. It opens up your kind of the conversation centers, and it actions your prefrontal cortex into setting a goal, because it's already starting to shut down. And that's the interesting thing about stress, though, is lots of these guys and gals who are suffering around with PTSD, if something like kicked in and there was like an explosion or something, they'd rise up and they'd get into survival mode. They probably wouldn't just apathetically sit there. There's something really cool about the body and it deeply wanting to survive. And stress is one of those tools. And like I was saying, we use some methods to start recalibrating that system. A couple of them I'll keep as just proprietary, but there's all kinds of really cool stuff like emotional recall, RPRs, things to just let the nervous system and the body start moving out those stress, those stories. Yeah,
I found too that you can do it internally with a lot of help from some medications. I have PTSD also, and I started with talking to someone, and I got into a couple different treatments. I did DMT a few times, and there needs to be more better regulated treatments for people, especially combat veterans. But that's like almost a thing where you get through the first part of it, and you sort of take a journey through, you guide your own tour through your soul, and it doesn't force, like we said, we don't like that word, but you get to see some traumatic events, and almost it's, for me personally, it was like you see it, you deal with it, it's okay, and then you keep moving forward. And as opposed to just here's a bunch of pills, take them, you'll be fine type shit. Talk to someone and then try to find, because I think I've seen ayahuasca, I've never done that, but I've talked to people who have, and there's different things, THC, that help people different ways. And I think it's speaking of being open-minded, why not just open your mind and see if you can help these men and women who have been through so much shit, maybe with something that'll help. That's my thought.
Yeah. Well, so you touch on DMT, that's what's released in REM. Ayahuasca does something similar that to pure DMT, where it triggers your pineal to release it. But that most people don't get into REM sleep anymore. That's one of the issues. That's why stress is so residual.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the best way to get into REM sleep? I mean, I like to, because I know like Ambien is not supposed to be good. I use Ambien. There's other sleeping aids, but what's the best way to try to get into REM?
So I don't know if any sleeping aids will actually allow a full REM sleep, but I'm not like a sleep expert. So I would, a couple things I'd like to touch on, Rob, that you hit there that I think are important. One, I'm not like, I prefer when I can get it from Mother Nature, but I am not completely opposed to getting medical help as well as part of my intervention to move through things. Sometimes a beta blocker is good. Sometimes a serotonin uptake is good. These things they have their place as part of like a holistic healing journey. Like if you're still using sleep aids, then something like Bufo might be really good.
Is that the toad?
Yeah, Bufo the toad.
Can you explain that? Because I don't know much about it. It sounds cool to me. One thing I knew from working in the jungle is the shinier and prettier it is, the more poisonous it probably is.
The less you're supposed to lick it.
Yeah. Isn't there a frog that you touch it and you can die?
Yeah, I mean, they got everything out there. Huh?
Jungles, I'll tell you what. I'll take desert over jungle any day. Everything in the jungle is trying to kill you.
Yeah, and it's like it's all around you. Where in the desert, you got some space to deal with it.
You can run from a camel spider, but a bullet ant, you're not going to see him come up and just bite you on the ass. Yeah. So I totally went off there. You were making a point.
It's all good. It's all
I'm
good.
being a jackass.
No, it's good. Yeah, it's a 5-MeO DMT. It's like the simplest answer. It's like 5 times the
really
dose. Like it's not literally, but it feels like that. It feels like you're moving through hyperspace, but it goes to work on you right away.
What's it called? Bufo?
Yeah, Bufo alvarez, I think is it's kind
wow.
of
No, because like with the DMT, most people haven't done it. The best way I describe it is a rocket taking off, and the first part is getting through the atmosphere, and it's pretty much scary as shit. But once you get through it, then now you're in space, and it's you're there. But you need to get through that first. I mean, it felt to me like, I don't know how, 10 minutes. I asked them how many hours I was out, and they were like, 4 minutes, but it felt like forever, because you get through that first part, and then it opens everything. Like I could see, it's almost like I had eyes 360. I could see everything. And it was just, like I said, a tour of my soul. And it was, I mean, I'm going to do it again just because I'm probably crazy.
Well, one, I think plant medicines have to be invited back into our culture on a whole new level, at least to start helping us break some cycles. Yeah, so what I think you're talking about, because one, I don't get, once you break through where your ego dissolves, so that's the key, your ego dissolves.
Mm-hmm. The doctor that administers it to me said you need to almost surrender to it. And I don't know if surrender, again, it's probably not the best word, but yeah,
well, it is, because you could fight it though, right? You could have
you could fight it, and you can make it miserable.
I'm not going anywhere. You'll make it miserable,
and you're going to have a bad trip.
Well, exactly, and that's what happens during these things. Is there's a whole bunch of factors with any of the plant medicines, but that's the surrender, where you almost take a back seat to it. And you know that back seat guy, because I think I know, like, once you start taking a voyage of your soul, but really you still exist there. That's more your psyche, less influenced by your ego, that I'm talking about from earlier. So interesting you mentioned this, because we're starting up a program called Citizen Green in Canada and the US. And it's basically it's going to use THC as its altered state plant medicine. But then it'll have programming throughout, and it's not just for PTSD. What it'll do is, when you transition from the military, you're up against, really, when you transition from anything, but the military especially, because they literally hammer you into being a soldier.
That's true.
Unlike anywhere else, right? You go through basic training, and then you go through whatever schools, and like you're constantly being molded and hammered on into this iteration. So one of the things that becomes difficult is actually shifting your identity, shifting your story on the other side of it, as you're like discovering your new purpose, right? Okay, well, who am I? How do I sit in the world as a non-operator or a non-soldier or whatnot? So that's one of the things you come up against, right? Is that transition as your mind is recalibrating to this new place. Then there's purpose, like, where am I going, right? Because in the military, one of the cool things about it is you're given your mission. It's like, okay, there's my mission, you know? That's just what I do. And it makes it kind of more simple, right? Because everything you do is in service to that mission. When you come out of it, you got to find your new mission, you know, and it could be work, but usually work runs out pretty quick. It has to have a little more passion behind it, right? But then what's happening is, as your mind recalibrates, the effects of PTSD, those stresses that you have not faced, will start to kick in, usually about 2 years later.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes.
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting. You know, it takes that long for the mind to just get down to those recalibrations. And it took a lot of years to develop all those stresses. So it's going to take some time on the other side. But anyways, we use THC as the altered state while they're moving through our programming that's going to tackle all these things. And what's cool, in Canada, we can offer the programming completely free, because our Veterans Affairs covers the cost of the medical marijuana. Down here in the US, we found some clever ways to offer it between, we'll say 30% now, but we're shooting for more, which a lot of the vets are already doing. They're chasing these deals. Like certain growers will have deals, and they're chasing them around the country with the states that have legalized it and all that. But we're going to be able to put it into a consistent place. And when they purchase through these consistent places, they'll have access to the courseware. Until we get going and we kind of get like some foundational money and stuff like that.
What is the course? Is it like it's a course like you do 2 a year? Yeah.
So basically, after I left the military, I got in the military, like in the SF, I was in awe of things like selections, behavioral modifications. We would call it training and preparation, but human dynamics, and that like I've always been interested in it, but it just like it took it to the next level of watching how creating arenas and spaces could shift people so much. And after I left, that's what I did, but I did it for civilians on the other side with the Special Forces experience, where we create arenas that shift people. So there's in person, but then there's also workups online and in a community, and then afterwards. And that's kind of an interesting point there. You have pre-event, event, and then post-event. That happens in life with everything we do all the time, right? There's before an event, we go through an event, and then there's post-event. Guys like you and I, we would be part of after actions in that post-event.
The mission, you have the brief, the mission, and the after action report. Yeah, it's the same thing.
So everything in life, really we can do that. And if we do it more intentionally, we're able to continue to expand that stress level. And there's a bunch of tools, a bunch of education, and that's what the course will cover. It's designed to be 12 months long, with not like going back to school though, a small video a week just to start inducing things that will go along with cannabis practices. Now, the thing with cannabis is we're also building up the research. I'm partnering with a blockchain company, Global Compliance, to gather data on what really works, like what strain grown in which way, smoked or eaten in a certain way works best for symptom X of, say, PTSD or for pain relief. And as the community goes, we're going to build that information up, and we're going to be able to spit out a little bit better data so that the medical world, doctors can, instead of just being like, here's your 3 grams a day, which is better than nothing, like better than no access, but it's like, okay, maybe you only need 3 puffs at this one time, feel some emotions, and then that's it for the day. Or maybe you need half joint smoked in this way, dried out to go to sleep. There's a whole bunch of different ways to use it. So it'll include like what we're calling ceremonial journeys, where you're incorporating the cannabis, but then also work where to start identifying personality patterns, to start shifting your identity in the way you want. And really it just builds, and just like working out muscles, it works out your cognitive traits as you move through. And what's cool is we can do this without ever saying you should do this, you are this, because the idea is to be yourself, fully.
And like we just started the conversation with, everyone's probably going to be a little bit different, I would imagine. But I mean that now, as far as REM sleep, we talked about, because there's a THC. I can imagine that. I've taken some gummies before, and it really helped me sleep. I just don't know what kind of sleep it is, but I mean, I was out.
Once again, not a sleep expert, but my theory is that it doesn't actually get you into REM sleep. It'll get you into more like deep narrative sleep, which is important too. Where, like the thing is you got to start tearing apart, what time of night are you getting into these? What is the depths? Like there is monitors, as part of this programming, we're going to bring in HRV through Dr. Mike T. Nelson. And with the HRV monitoring, for those who partake in it, we can start tracking down all kinds of levels of things on your nervous system with it. And then one of it will be to see, like, because some people don't know what it's like to feel a REM dream versus a deep cycle versus something else, versus fantasizing before you wake up, or kind of daydreaming before you fall asleep. Those are all different levels of neural processing. But then we can start to tie that together. So, oh, geez, I've fallen into REM sleep, and wow, today, usually you feel more tired because the body has begun to recalibrate. It's dropped down its guards, and it's like, okay, I need to recoup. And then, so you'll usually see a bit of a drop in the HRV. Yeah, sorry, I kind of diverged a little there. I don't know if that
no, it's all good. No, this is interesting, because one of the biggest issues, well, even for me, but for other guys, is the sleep. Like, I'm like just literally laying there and not being able to sleep, or waking up at 3:30 in the morning and just laying there. It's like, I might as well go to the gym right now because I'm up. And I think I heard you mention you don't use alarm clocks. Like I don't need to either. I'm just gonna be up. So I don't know if that's healthy or not.
Yeah. So when it comes to interventions on the physiological plane, which completely impact the psychological, sleep is one of the hardest to change, because it sits on top of every other pattern we have. How we eat, how we move, the stresses we bring in, the stresses we bring out. So it's a hard one to change. Just kind of interesting. check in with your sleep, because you probably, I think you maybe mentioned that you went to therapy or whatnot, but like, is it when you start to have a certain dream, you wake up? Is it because some people just don't want to fall asleep because they're afraid of having to face those dreams,
No, I'm all about them. I don't, when I have a nightmare, which I will once in a while, it's never a combat dream. It's going to be something ridiculous, like locked up in jail or a dinosaur or something just weird. It's not the combat never really scared me. There were, moments where, holy shit. Because either if you get hit with a bullet, you either get hit or you don't. And if a close call is like, wow, that was fast. But at the moment, it was never scary. And afterwards, it was more of, just because I've been very, very lucky. I've never seen one of my friends hurt. So that's good. But after the fact, having been in a house where we kill people in front of other people, it's like, okay, that bothers me a little, but it's never been it's not, I'm afraid to sleep. It's either my mind is just racing about stuff that I'm consciously thinking, or I don't put my stupid phone down, maybe just read a book and go to sleep.
Well, yeah, we could get into blue light and stuff like that. That's going to throw that off. I just do want to offer this up. I have a friend, he's a former SEAL. He was on sleep meds. And with Bufo, he went.
Yeah, get into that.
So he went and he sat, just like for people listening, it's not usually 0 to Bufo. There's things we can do that will create the conditions for us to have like the breakthroughs, in better ways. Because sometimes you break through and the messages is very much a physical message, like, oh, I'm carrying pain here and I should stop doing this and whatnot. The more you tune up your house and then you sit with the more powerful medicines, the more deeply rooted and backwards in the timeline it will be. Anyhow, he sat, and he thought it was going to be all bliss and balloons and stuff. And, sometimes what we need isn't bliss and balloons. It's going to be the worst thing you face. And that's what happened to him. And like, he actually, he closed down for a day or two and he's like, okay, I'm going to start facing this. But interestingly, he literally went to pick up his sleep meds, to take for sleep, and he put it in his hand and it felt heavy.
No kidding.
Like this has happened, like when your body starts to experience certain things, that's what muscle testing's base is on, that your body kind of knows what's good for it and what's not good for it. Anyway, it's felt heavy. He's been off them ever since. I couldn't tell you the exact reasoning, but I do know this. There's recalibrations that happen at the speed of light. And those recalibrations help the mind settle, retune, express emotions. Because sometimes, like you were saying, you just got to take a back seat to it. So that's what I use THC for. I maybe once a month, I'll sit and I'll do it usually around the full moon, because I don't sleep around the full moon. I don't know what it is. Like I just literally, oh yeah, full moon's coming. I don't even have to look outside. I just fucking can't.
It's coming. You can feel it.
Yeah,
that's kind of badass though. That's like werewolf shit.
Well, I think it's the hunter in me. That's what I like to say, because I don't love not sleeping, but I'm like, okay, well, I'll make the most of it. And then I'll just set up my space a little bit, be intentional about how I smoke it. It's not just fucking hitting the bong and putting on a fucking comedy. It's like I'm looking to flush some stuff. And it's interesting because I get that same feeling where I take a kind of like a conscious backseat. My emotions flow. And then I don't have to do anything else. It's just my body has had time to process these emotions. And it's a shame that we get so detached from these emotions, because the shitty ones suck to feel. Yeah, no one's going to argue with that. But if you detach from your emotions, then you rob yourself of feeling all the more beautiful ones too. Feeling even closer.
That's a great
to your
point. Great point. Yeah.
Because you can't have one. You can't do one without the other. That's just the way it works. And usually, unfortunately, we don't backfill pain with those love emotions. And anyhow, once we sit with them, resolve them, we get this access to a whole new bank. And then usually it starts to manifest, to go back to PTG. You feel more connected. You do more for your community. And community doesn't have to be like a giant grouping. It just could be your family. You know what I mean? So yeah, if you're like ever interested, just hit me up. I have a
Oh,
place
yeah,
that
for
I
sure.
go that's super. She works a lot actually with vets, specifically. It's weird how life works out, but mostly SEALs. Yeah,
Is that the medicine woman, as you call her?
yeah. Like I've graduated to calling her a shaman.
That's
If I'm
awesome.
if I'm gonna be, she would never call herself a shaman.
Uh-huh.
But as I've explored these concepts more, and slowly over time, she is definitely that. So at a certain point, medicine people
That's
help
not
you.
a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Well, the thing is like full shaman is like the kind of the root definitions are one who shows you God,
Mhm.
and that's a tricky word, right? God has a lot of history, if we will, and a lot of
God's caused a lot of wars. God,
like,
people get pretty serious about God or their version of God.
their version, right? So it seems like we're trying to explain this energy, we'll call it the universe,
Energy.
whatever.
I like energy. Yeah.
That's usually what I work with because, I'm part of the modern world and we can prove lots in the physical plane. And not that I need proof to believe, it's just, it really helps. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, it does.
it helps the mind calibrate around it. And yeah,
proof
like
proof is good, but people love. I grew up Catholic, and people just love the word faith. You just have to believe this. And right now, I've got an aunt up in Montana who's listening to this, probably losing her mind that I said I like the word energy. But yeah,
that's
one of
why I
those
try to
things.
use a lot of them.
Yeah,
I'll use a
yeah.
lot of them because from my studies of these theologies and theories and philosophies, at the pinnacle of it all, it sounds very much like they're talking about the same thing. And
That's what I was saying earlier. Yeah, and it's I mean, if you want to screw something up, get man's interpretation of something, and you usually screw it up.
yeah.
So,
Well,
but again, that's I think it's being open minded, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. But boy, I mean, nowadays in Canada and the United States, you see it in Europe that if you're open minded but not on the right subjects, people tend to get violent about that too. So it's a I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of funky. So, okay. Now, if we're talking about sleep, I did hear you mention before, and I dug this, and I could be way off, but like when you wake up immediately without opening your eyes, like try to smile or something and get some positive energy going. Is that true?
Yeah. These are all like little micro interventions because the morning is when your cortisol is highest.
Okay.
So there's a chance if your mood is already going to be prime to be in a more miserable state, and we'll call it a lower state, it's like prime in that morning space. So yeah, the literal act of smiling begins to release those neuro juices. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
you
it
know
does.
how it is.
It works. It works.
Or I'll bring it back to being an operator. You know what I mean when I talk about an irreverent sense of humor and how powerful it is.
Yeah, I've seen it, and it's real. Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah. So what it does is a good sense of humor, like, because these are situations, folks, where like they don't completely fucking make sense, and there's a lot of like, okay, this is pretty heavy. You can't sit there and worry about it in that moment. Afterwards, we start to rebuild sense of it. But if we put that lighthearted twist on it, and I use the word irreverent for in the military because that's how it can come across to people. That's how it's been. That's how an outsider might view this, but it's not. It's a great coping strategy. So yeah, in the morning, yeah, as like all those other good juices are flowing through me, I just try to lay there for a bit before I open my eyes and engage with the environment around me, before I really turn on my senses. And our mind should be bathed in some other things at that point if we slept a little bit, and then I just do some simple affirmations if that's what I need, like whatever. I'm like right now I'm healing my kind of what I'll call my wounds with money that I inherited from my folks. So my folks were both fairly poor. They became more successful, but they didn't douse the kind of the poor mindset, and that got passed on to myself and my sister. Now that's a limiting conditioning on my part. So affirmations, and say them out loud.
Really?
Because when something's said aloud, your ears soak it back up, and it's something like 70% more likely to
if
stay.
You say it out loud.
If you say it out loud, yeah, because I think it just creates another possible feedback loop. And there's different things actioned, right? When you say something in your mind, You're not moving your tongue really, you're not
Yeah,
actioning
right.
a lot of those things. And those are just little baby steps.
That's
really
starting the day.
just kind of kicking
Yeah.
off,